Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. We have been talking extensively about how this Bitcoin breakout was going to be taking us upwards of $40,000 and $50,000 before we see a major correction. We're starting to see a pullback inside of Bitcoin. I wanted to break down what it means moving forward for long-term holders so that you guys can be properly positioned to make the most money possible on this next run. We're also going to be breaking down one of the brand new ecosystems inside of the market, one that I believe has a significant amount of upside potential inside of DeFi, inside of NFTs, inside of meme coins. This is an ecosystem that many people are overlooking. I believe has significant upside potential over this coming bull run. I'm going to break it down. Make sure you stay all the way to the end. It's going to teach you guys a lot. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are to start off today's video looking at Bitcoin, and as you guys can see, Bitcoin has had a sell-off in here. Now, this can go one of two ways. We can see a strong buyback take place inside of this candle, and if that happens, then we're probably just going to end up getting continuation. The only problem that I have with that, if we come out here and look at a daily time frame, we can actually see that this is looking like a little bit more like exhaustion. And if you guys notice, where we ended up tagging was the resistance that we talked about in my last video. Now, when we're looking at this, this was the resistance that we were watching, and we knew that it could come in here on the low end and stop around 37,500, or it could come up here to about 40K before we see that pullback. Now, the market ended up peaking at about $38,000, just slightly above our target by about $500, and now we're starting to see that pullback coming in. So if the market continues to sell off, we have 7 hours until this daily candle closes. If this ends up closing and this has a, basically this giant wick with a smaller candle body that could even be red. If it's red, that's a bearish pin hammer candle showing major exhaustion, and we could be in for a decent correction to come right after that. Now, if the market ends up getting a buyback and we end up coming in here a little bit higher, then at that point, we could see continuation. But we do have this 4-hour. This green candle was an exhaustion candle, and now we're seeing this bearish engulfing kind of coming in here. It's not the most ideal scenario for Bitcoin to see continuation, but it's at least not impossible big picture. So that's what we're watching for in the shorter time frames, at least for with Bitcoin. Looking at it on a weekly time frame, it's kind of in the same boat. We have 3.5 days until this closes. If we see this thing ending up closing bearish and having some sort of big rejection candle on a weekly time frame, we could be in for a decent size correction. Whether that means we come back down and retest the high that we broke from, being 31,500, or whether we were to come all the way back down to this main trend line, which we always have to keep in mind when we're looking at this Bitcoin cycle, because that's something that can definitely happen inside of this trend. So far, we've been respecting this trend. We've been holding it, grinding off of it. Any sort of correction we would think could actually come back down and retest that, which we would be looking at, potentially retest at 31,500 being this prior high would line up with that also being on that trend line. So we can watch for anything to happen right in here, but it's going to take a few days to develop. If this turns into a rejection candle, it's going to be looking like a decent correction could be in. On the daily, we're starting to see the early signs of that potentially happening right in here. On the 4-hour, what we're looking at is, kind of a little bit of the same, a lot of exhaustion all the way through after this first breakout. So we're going to keep watching, see what ends up happening. Now, guys, let's talk about the altcoins, break down this ecosystem and why I believe that it could be so profitable moving forward from here. So first thing we're talking about today is going to be Hex. Now, the thing I want you to remind you guys is there's two different versions of Hex nowadays. Because of the PulseChain network going live, this basically created two versions. So we have the PulseChain version, which is this one right here, and then we have the ERC20 version right here. So this is the one that's been around. This is the main one forever. And what you guys notice is right after that PulseChain launch, we saw this massive lower low in price. Now, as it stands, the price pretty much looks the same. It looks like, we might end up going a little bit lower in here, but probably not much, before we make at least one more final high. Probably end up retesting the low that we set in here before we made this next massive lower low, right? This would have been the bottom of the market at December 2022. And so at that move, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up coming back up to retest it. But to come all the way back up to where it was pre-launch of PulseChain network, I think that that's going to take a little bit more time. Now, when I'm looking at this, because of the fact there's two of them, right? There's the ERC version, and then there's the PulseChain version, the PRC version. So when we're looking at this, this one is, in my opinion, the better version. With Hex on ERC20, I think that it's going to do its thing. I think it can still have, you know, a cycle, a new cycle, but it's more one-dimensional as far as the value that it can capture compared to Hex on PulseChain. When we're looking at PulseChain, we're looking at a brand new ecosystem. So far, what we've seen, after we got added to exchanges, we made this ABC correction. And then once Richard Hart got sued by the SEC, that was where this big sell-off came in. But we still ended up holding a higher high from the sacrifice. We went through this big rounded bottom. And to me, this just looks a lot like what we saw in 2018 for Bitcoin, where we just made this big rounded bottom, sideways accumulation, and started breaking out. So when I'm looking at this, I think that this has a lot more upside potential still to come. So far, we've only finished a subwave 1, subwave 2. We're inside of wave 4. Can't say if we're done or not. But then it's looking like we're going to be making another impulse upwards of about 0.2 or this lower high here. So that's what I'm watching for, looking forward to with Hex. Remember, this is the PulseChain version of Hex. Because when we're looking at this, we finished a wave 1 in here. This is our wave 3, and I still think we have one more impulse coming. After that, move to our next lower high being 0.022. I think that we'll probably get a 4-wave correction back down to, you know, roughly where we're at right now, maybe even a little lower. And then I still think that we have another wave 5 coming in here. Could take us all the way back up to 0.031 or even at that all-time high number, 0.043. I wouldn't be surprised at all. The thing about this market cycle is I kind of like the fact that they ended up making their own new token, because if we see and look at the trends of crypto throughout all years past, this is now my 3rd cycle, so I've had a great opportunity of being able to study and analyze these things. And what I've personally learned is the fact that it's always the new cryptos every cycle that end up gaining a little bit more traction to begin. And a lot of them will end up taking a lot of market share from these older cryptos. Which older cryptos end up sticking around is ultimately determined by which ones end up performing the best to begin the cycle. We're seeing Solana do that. We're seeing Chainlink do that. But what we're seeing inside of Hex itself, because we launched a new version inside of the PulseChain network, it almost gives it a brand new cycle. It gives it a new appearance where it's this new shiny project, where it's this brand new thing. And so because of that, the upside potential is a lot bigger. When you have a lot of bag holders that bought at the top of a bull run, because Hex on Ethereum, you know, it made one of the biggest bull runs out of the entire cycle. I think it was, you know, top 5 best performing altcoin. Maybe not that good, but it was one of the very best for sure. It had this big cycle, so a lot of people bought up in here, and a lot of those people are bag holders. And so to see this thing go down 98, 99% from where they bought, they have to be bag holding. The higher that this gets, the more people are going to be selling, trying to get back their losses. And so when we're looking at these things, Hex itself, this new version, it doesn't have any real bag holders for the most part. I mean, if it does technically, because of the fact you have the people that have been holding Hex, the bag holders got a duplicated version. But you got to think that because of the fact that's a duplicated version, you got to assume that they would be more likely to just continue to hold this because it got it for free, right? They're looking at this, well, you know, I'll sell my original Hex, I'll get out of that at a break even, and then I've got this free version still sitting on PulseChain. So I'm just going to kind of hold that and see where it goes. I just think emotionally, fundamentally, there's more upside potential with this new version of Hex than the other one, and that's why I think that it's still a good buy. We've only first broken out of the bottom. We're looking at this on a long-term basis, and we've only made a one higher high, right? We just broke out of the very all-time low of the bear market. So when we're looking at this big picture, the most upside potential is going to be happening from here. Even if it goes sideways for a little while, I don't think much of that's going to be happening. We're getting into 2024. We're only have to go to about April before we're at the Bitcoin halving. And historically, that's been when the peak point of the bull run sets in. So looking at these altcoins breaking out of these bottoms, Hex specifically, it's got a lot of upside coming. And it's a really undervalued pick in my opinion. Although personally, I'm not the biggest investor in it just because of the fact it's got a high market cap. And I think that these market caps are almost an illusion, because once the money really comes into the market, then we truly get to see how much money is flowing around. But when something's sitting at a top 10, top 15, top 20 stance in total market cap, and keep in mind this one's actually dropped some. Now when we're looking at this, we're looking at about $8.8 billion in market cap. That's a pretty big, crypto. So I don't personally like to invest into too many high caps. I like to find more undervalued plays. But for anybody that's still interested in this project, I think it's definitely one that's going to do well long term. And the market cap, although it is a little bit high, I still think it's going to give you relatively good gains in comparison with all of the other high caps, potentially even outperforming them in the same way it did last cycle. Now the next one we're going to be looking at here is going to be wrapped pulse. So this is PulseChain, right? This is the token of PulseChain. Now this is the wrapped version, meaning you can trade it on ERC20. So this is actually the ERC20 version of PulseChain. Same sort of thing though. Now the chart looks the same. The only difference is we ended up almost fully retracing that move, but it's all the same. This is all the same setup. A big ABC correction. We finished the C wave, broke out, and then started that uptrend. We have very good volume in here. We have breakout volume. We just cleared out of that range resistance right here, flipped it as support, and we're starting to see continuation. So depending on what Bitcoin does, if Bitcoin ends up seeing further pullbacks, we get a big exhaustion and have to come all the way back down to the trend line, potentially coming all the way back down to the range lows at that, then at that point, we're going to be expecting the same thing happening here. These will pull back and make a lower low. This one will pull back, probably come back down to where it broke out from. And we just have to be aware of that. It can't always just go straight up because of the fact Bitcoin is ultimately the driver of value inside of the market. I do think that it looks like there's plenty more upside potential. Like I was drawing with the wave count, we've only completed a few different waves. This is a wave 1 of 3, this is a wave 3 of 3, and we still have wave 5 of 3 to come. I think that this one ends up topping right here, pretty much at the lower high it made right after the lawsuit and the breakdown from that. I think that's where we're going to end up coming in to the top of this wave 5 before a correction comes in, and we can tell that this one is a little bit more volatile than the others. When we're comparing it to Hex, it's not quite as volatile. Hex is a lot more consistent. Pulse has never had a prior cycle, and so out of all of them, I think that this one has better upside potential than Hex does. This is the key one that you would probably want to focus on going into this next bull run, and I think that that's the main one, considering the fact it only has $550 million in total market cap. So it's way more undervalued in comparison. The upside potential would obviously be higher, and if you're looking at one that could potentially give you that 25, 50x, maybe 100x if you're real lucky, it would most likely be this one, because it just has way more upside potential. Because keep in mind, guys, when we're looking at an ecosystem, we're looking at something where new cryptos can add and build to. So by default, if any of those cryptos that are building in your ecosystem get adoption, it's going to trickle into your main coin as well. So I do think that this is a prime example of that. Hex is already established, and because it's established, people are going to be looking at it. The entire community of Hex is going to be looking at this, and it's way more undervalued, and they're going to think to themselves, oh man, if this hits the same value as Hex, I'm already going to be up significantly. You'd be up, you'd be up a lot at that point just to go to the same market cap as where Hex is right now. So that's why I would be more focused on PulseChain if I was to be a big investor. And I don't think that $550 million in total market cap is overvalued by any stretch of the woods. I think that that's actually undervalued big picture. Now let's assume we get a correction in here, but once we can get above this level, the wave A and wave B, this kind of consolidation level that we were in right before the SEC lawsuit, if we can get above back, if we can reclaim that level once again, I think that'll set us in for a much, much bigger move to the upside. Probably all the way back up near the range highs, but it's all going to be dependent on what happens with Hex. In the same way that this is going to be following along with Hex, they're both going to be following along with what Bitcoin does. And so we're just going to have to watch both of these. Just keep in mind that this one has great volume, much more undervalued, and one that I'm going to be looking at long term as well. So the last one on today's video is going to be PulseX. Now PulseX is another one that I think has more upside potential than Hex, and it's sitting at about $3.2 billion in total market cap. This one, maybe is the most volatile one. It had the most upside when we started the cycle. It also had the most downside when we started that correction, but it all looks the exact same. Every one of these cycles look the same. Great volume in here. We had just broken out of this accumulation range, and they're now looking like they want that next high. Most likely this one ends up coming to this level here. And then on the high end, we could end up coming up to this level here, which is going to be like 0.0003394. all the way up to 0.0004271. So those are the exact prices. It's kind of relatively small. It's got a high number of tokens. Now, when we're looking at these, all of them are in the same situation, and I think that all of them are setting up in the same way. For me, once these guys get above this first lower high that we set in, because remember, this is our main level of support. It was our main level here, became resistance once the SEC lawsuit came in. Once we get above that, it'll basically be the same level as once Bitcoin broke above 25K and how we got that massive move after. I think that that's our main level that we need to be watching for, because once we get above that, we've reclaimed the level prior to the SEC lawsuit. We reclaimed the level that we had consolidating prior and after, and then that would be setting us up for a much bigger move to the upside. And this is one that I still think is relatively undervalued. Yes, it's got a high market cap, but if we're talking about something that could see a significant amount of volume, a lot of these tokens are going to get burned up in the process. And so I do think that it has the potential of seeing a good market cycle. I don't think the returns will be quite as big as what we see inside of PulseChain. Hex has got probably the lowest chance of a lot of upside just because it's got the highest market cap, and I think that, you know, it's a little bit more one-dimensional in comparison with the other two. Regardless, though, guys, I think this entire ecosystem will do well. Regardless of what your opinions are on Richard Hart, I think he's kind of an idiot, personally. Like, I think he's smart as far as what he was able to build, all of this fun stuff. But as far as, like, how he acts on social media, I think he just kind of comes off as an idiot and a narcissist. So, for me, it's like, I don't really like the guy so much. But I do get around some of his thought process around crypto. When we're talking about crypto, a lot of you guys weren't around for the prior cycles. A lot of you guys weren't around prior to 2017. And it kind of shows, because if you were around for that time, 2016 specifically, around 2016 and even before that time, what we ended up seeing inside of the market was Bitcoin and the crypto markets were a libertarian movement. It was all about freedom of government, freedom of money, freedom of banks, being able to have our own payment system away from these things, not having all of these governments that can kind of say and tax and take everything from you. That was always the beginning of crypto. And Richard Hart always had that sort of idea from the beginning. He was always somebody that believed in decentralization first, not having these backdoors where you can manipulate, where you can change things. And regardless of the fact he's made a ton of money off of these markets, which everybody that's created an altcoin that's done well has, the thing that he is always has been for is decentralization first. All of his projects are decentralized. They're all community driven and owned. And to me, that is valuable. And it really probably wouldn't be as valuable in most people's eyes unless you came from the prior cycles, from the OG days of crypto, because it was really the emphasis on what we were all doing, why we were in the market, was that's what we were following along, was this idea that we could finally be free from governments and banks and all of that stuff. So when I'm looking at these markets, I think that they have a lot of potential, because the thing about it is the fact Richard Hart doesn't own any of these. So even though he might be getting sued, these are still publicly traded. These are still just freely run and will probably continue to do so. The way that they were launched, in my opinion, was more free than anything. All of these were divvied out by people donating money to a charity. So it's not like anybody was expecting upside potential. It's just the fact that they were donating to a charity. Then they all got a token to basically resemble that value donated. And it just so happens that we can, you know, trade this for value on the open markets. And that's the beauty of crypto. I think that these are going to do well. I like the long-term projection. I personally think Richard Hart can come off as a little bit of an idiot, but at the same time, he actually has a good idea of what he's making and building inside of these markets. And so for me, these are ones that I've personally participated in with sacrifices. I've already believed in the long term. Wanted to give you guys an update because it's been a little while since I've talked about these. Now that they're starting to show a lot of strength, starting to break out, expect plenty more upside from these long term. Anyways, this is the video I had for you. If you guys found value, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. If you guys want to join the Discord server or potentially even see what I'm investing in inside of the markets, how I'm trading my money, you know, any pre-sales, any sort of NFT picks, DeFi buy literally anything in the market. I'm even doing stuff outside of the crypto market, stocks, commodities, things like that. Uranium is a big sector that I'm personally invested in that I like, and you guys are going to be able to see all of that if you do join my private group. Links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. One-time payment, lifetime access. You guys are always going to be able to see what I'm buying, selling, and trading long-term over the course of my life. I know that you guys are majority over half my age, so you know, chances are I'll probably end up outliving you guys, so you'll be able to have access to that eternally. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.